Have an exciting guest for you guys today. Brian Watson is the Cactus legend. He's essentially the embodiment of the agency's history. He's often cited as the ultimate homegrown talent, having spent his entire 24 career at Cactus. He started the agency as a junior copywriter in early 2000s and worked his way up to executive creative director before being named chief creative officer in June of 2025. Brian was a key leader behind one of the most famous and effective mental health campaigns in advertising history, Man Therapy. This campaign used a fictional character, Dr. Rich Mahogany, and dark humor to reach working age men about suicide prevention, a demographic who's traditionally hard to engage with. His portfolio includes massive regional and national brands like Colorado Lottery, Fjällräven, and the University of Miami. Brian is known for the Cactus philosophy, which prioritizes his work that helps people thrive. He often speaks about advertising as a force for good, specifically in the realms of healthcare and mental health. Brian, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate you spending some time with us.
Glad to be here. And whoever wrote that bio for me, I owe them a debt of gratitude. That was quite glowing.
Let's go. Well, the LLMs are pretty good at synthesizing this stuff these days. I won't pretend that it doesn't play a big part in show research now. I used to do everything by hand. Watch 2 to 4 hours of content, and I think there's a certain amount of soul that's being lost in doing primary research. But man, the advantages and the powers of AI to kind of synthesize information is just, sometimes hard to put down, right?
Yeah, it filled my soul to hear it talk about me so well. So I appreciate it.
Let's go. Awesome, man. Probably one of the longest tenures at an agency that I've ever heard of. Would love to just hear a little bit of your origin story, though. So where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And then was Cactus your first job in the industry?
I grew up outside of Chicago, hence my loyal Cubs family that I'm still a part of. But moved out here to Colorado when I was 12, went to school out here at CU Boulder, and kind of stumbled into advertising. Went to school originally thinking I'd be like an athletic trainer and a kinesiology major. Turned out I was really terrible at math and science, so had to find a new way, and kind of took an ad class on a whim and really loved it. Fell in love with the creativity of it, the problem solving aspects of it, and that it was just seemed to tap into a lot of parts of me that I didn't even know were there or were unique about me. And so graduated there, kind of poked around a little bit, had a freelance project or two, but really struggled to, find some place to land early on. And then almost went back to school I was like, well, maybe I'm actually not cut out for this. Maybe all the professors who told me I was going to do well were wrong. And almost went back to school to be a teacher, high school coach, something like that. And literally the week before my classes were going to start to get like a second degree and do something else, I got a call from Cactus for a freelance project that quickly turned into part-time. And 24 years later, I'm here still. So it's kind of crazy. I never would have expected to be at the same place this long, but it's kind of, being a Cactus is kind of like living in Colorado. The longer you're here, the harder it is to leave.
I love that. I don't have that longevity, but I did 9 years at my last agency and 5 before that. So only 2 places in my 15-year career. But has it been hard at all to stay at one agency without burning out? I imagine, you probably get a recruiter phone call or a LinkedIn message every now and then, but what is it about the culture, and what is it about the lifestyle in Colorado that just has kept you on the path, so to say? Be curious on kind of both those elements.
Yeah, I mean, Cactus has been the kind of place where, there's so many ways I could talk about this, having been here so long, but I realized really early on that this was a place where they cared just as much about me, the person, as me, the employee. And I, hadn't worked at other agencies, but I had plenty of other jobs, coming up in life. And I knew that that was a pretty rare thing to find and something I wanted to hold on to. And really, every time there's been a fork in the road and a new path offered, there's just been too much here that I valued that I know is not necessarily replicable anywhere you go. And I guess you could say it, I've had the good fortune to see other friends and colleagues jump around to take opportunities that didn't necessarily work out. And, you chase a job title or a paycheck, and it's not always the greener grass you expect it to be. And that's not to say that path doesn't work out great for a lot of people. Most people in this industry jump around and get a lot of great benefit out of that and a lot of growth personally and in their career. But for me, it's been one of those things where I've always felt like I had the opportunity to water the grass I was standing in here and help make this place, the agency I'd go start, the agency I would dream to be at, if I ever could. And I've been really fortunate to be at a place where I just think I have a lot of DNA in common with Cactus. And, you asked about kind of burnout and things like that, being at the same place. Man, one thing I tell people all the time, every other job I've had, there's always days where you don't want to have to work, period. But every other job I've had that feeling of like, oh, I don't want to have to go to work there today. I don't want to go in there and just kind of feel the weight of what it feels like to be there. And I'm really, really fortunate that in all my time at Cactus, that is a feeling I've never had. I've always been energized to be here and be surrounded by the people that we have and in the place that we have here.
That's awesome, man. Well, great ambassador for culture. And I think that speaks a lot about you and also the agency as well. So love that. Boulder has had its moments as kind of a creative mecca, probably most famously, with Crispin Porter Bogusky. I used to, go out there, maybe go to Colorado twice a year, maybe go to Boulder once a year to, go hit Sterling Rice and you guys and CPB and maybe try and get a meeting at Crocs or something like that. And it was funny, like some of the people at CPB, since they were a pretty, they were an award-winning kind of storied shop. So they did recruit heavily from New York, Chicago, LA. And they used to tell me stories about how like about 50% of the candidates, when they were getting driven from Denver airport out to Boulder, that kind of 1 hour drive out into farm country, half the time the exec would tell them to turn around the car and take it back to the airport. It was such a once you get to Boulder, it's amazing, but like that stretch between, it's like, where the hell am I going? I'm a New Yorker. I'm from LA, but then I also have a lot of friends that just fall in love with the lifestyle of outdoor recreation and kind of like the vibes and the music scene and the opportunity to, ski and snowboard all winter. So I'd be curious, how does the kind of the backdrop in which you operate kind of fuel your creativity and work-life balance, if there's such a thing, or work-life integration? Be kind of curious, like what's in the water in Boulder, because CPB and you guys and definitely there's been a lot of like really innovative companies and innovative shops that have come out of that area.
Yeah, it's a good question that I don't know if I have the perfect answer to, but I think there's a certain optimism I think that comes with living in Colorado. Maybe that's because the sun is out literally almost every day of the year. Like if we get 2 or 3 days in a row that are cloudy, people start freaking out around here. So I think that does bring a sense of optimism and life and vibrancy, though, to the everyday experience. Even in the winter, it could be 65 degrees any given day of the year. It's just this kind of roller coaster ride all year long of weather, but a lot of good weather in the midst of that. And I think that creates this, not only is the setting beautiful and the outdoor opportunities are beautiful, whether you're into hiking or camping or running or skiing or snowboarding or rafting. Like there's so much to go out and do here. And, growing up as a kid in the Midwest, it was very, very different than that. Like you don't want to be outside because it's so muggy and hot when the weather is, quote unquote nice. And then there's mosquitoes in the evening, and it's just, it's not as pleasant as it is here. But this is just a place where it kind of beckons you to be outdoors all the time and go out and take advantage of life. And I think that creates a lot of sense of community, and it creates a lot of vibrancy. And there's so many beautiful things to take in just on my drive to and from the office. I try not to become too accustomed to how beautiful it is just to be around out here. And so the inspiration that comes from that, I think, is something that you probably feel and subconsciously more than you do consciously. But I think it creates this sense in people that anything's possible and good things are always possible. And so maybe that's what's in the water. I don't know.
I like that. I live in San Diego, which is, a place where people go on vacation. And other than, Hawaii and maybe, Florida during certain times of the year, it's kind of, pretty epic. And you can get desensitized to living in paradise. I've heard of people in Hawaii, every time I go to Hawaii, I'm like, oh, I should figure out how to move here. And then people that get island fever, so you have to I think you have to be intentional about being grateful and looking around and seeing wow, how truly blessed you are to, live in certain places within the country and the world. Yeah. So I love that.
Absolutely. Because I think having that in your system and the optimism that helps create, I feel like it's hard to be creative and negative at the same time. And so I feel like optimism is really kind of this, trick, kind of this little fast track to creativity. A lot of times just believing that something's possible really starts to open up doors that might not open up for you otherwise.
Wow, I love that as almost as a tactic, to some degree. You can't be creative if you're down or depressed or negative. You got to kind of have to figure out how to pep yourself up, so to speak, grab yourself by the bootstraps in order to be creative. And I think we'll revisit that topic, especially when we get into some of the work that you've done around mental health, because obviously that's a epidemic inside of culture these days, whether it's outright depression or anxiety or loneliness. And I know you've done some interesting work to address some of those things. So I'd love to get into that, as we dive into the work, maybe in the middle of the back of the interview, but want to spend a little bit more time on kind of the macro. So you're also a fierce defender of the independent agency model in a world of massive holding companies. Obviously, it's been a tumultuous year in kind of the traditional holdco models. Be curious of your kind of POV on the landscape, and what do you think are the advantages of being an indie in the current day and age?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to my own experience that, I've got no, this is the right way or the wrong way to do it on that, but it's the way we've done it. I've fallen in love with being at a small independently owned shop. I graduated and I was like, okay, I got to go try to get a job at the biggest shops. Maybe I go home to Chicago, maybe I go to New York, maybe I go to LA. And because you think bigger is always better. And that's just kind of like in the air we breathe in our culture. And when bigger didn't, open a door for me right away, and I landed someplace small, the advantages I got were tremendous. When I started at Cactus, I was the only copywriter on staff. And so, yeah, they had some layoffs previously, and they were kind of just freelancing here and there. And so I had a little built-in job security that hopefully, I think got me through some tough times that I may not have otherwise survived as I was young and learning. But it was a place where, because of that, I got to do everything. I got to work on all kinds of products, all kinds of industries with a lot of different teams and clients, and learned a ton. And I feel like I got my master's in advertising by just my first 2 years of saying yes to everything and diving into everything and doing everything I can to I'd heard somewhere before, like when someone asks you if you can do something, say yes, then figure out how to do it. And so that was kind of the way I went after it. And I think the benefit that gave me was just so much experience so quickly. Whereas, there's nothing wrong with being at a big agency and under a holding company necessarily. There's pros and cons, but one of the cons is I interview a lot of people now and who are looking for work. And I find so many young creatives who've been at a huge agency for 1, 2, sometimes 3 years and hardly have anything in their book to show for it because they're always competing to get the winning work and theirs doesn't get chosen, or, they've got a bunch of tweets, but that's all that they've really got. And, and the rest is still their student book. And it can be frustrating for some people. And obviously some people have great success going that route, and that's amazing. But for me, I've really just appreciated everything that the small agency way of doing things has gotten me. And I think you end up able to kind of make your own decisions and steer the ship the way you think is best. And it's, at least for us, it's been about people first the whole time. And, we want to do tremendously great work that is really successful for our clients. But, how I talk about it a lot with people here and people I'm interviewing, we have a really high bar for the quality of work that we try to make. We don't always hit the ball out of the park every time, but we're trying. But we have an equally high bar for the quality of the experience that we have here. And the people matter, taking care of one another matters. I think we've shown that you can do consistently great work and have high standards for the quality of the creative without squeezing people up like a tube of toothpaste and then tossing them aside for the next one. I think you can have it both ways.
That's awesome, man. Love that perspective. I think especially for, the young people out there that are graduating and trying to get into the workforce, that idea of getting, your hands dirty and the opportunity to work on a lot of cool things early.
You get a lot of at-bats.
I love that. Very cool. All right. Let's hop into, some of the work. So I think, the Man Therapy campaign is one that you've got a lot of accolades and is something that comes up quite often. I think it's, probably unique in this moment in time. Maybe not unique, but I think we're kind of entering a new phase in culture right now. A lot of new fears, to contend with. The fear of AI, whether it's the kind of baseline simmering fear of is it going to, create disruption in my industry? Am I going to get laid off? Am I going to become irrelevant in my career or job? And then there's kind of the existential AI is the Terminator coming? And then, we also live in a world where, geopolitics and global stability is, the world orders are being kind of rearranged and chessboard is getting, redistributed in front of our very eyes. But, a lot of statistics say that this is the most anxious generation in history, the most lonely. Suicide is on the rise, especially within young men, strangely, one of the largest growing cohorts. And, I'd be curious, what was the insight for the Man Therapy campaign? And, humor, taking humor to tackle such a heavy subject is risky. When I think of all the BetterHelp ads or all the AI tools that I see for people to try and use technology to kind of dive into some of these topics, I don't think I've ever seen humor used as kind of the medium in which to communicate to this cohort, but I see, why it was effective, but I also see it being incredibly risky. And if you don't get it right, it could have really fallen on its face. So be curious if you could maybe give us a little bit of a play-by-play on that campaign, take us back to the brief. And, how did the client respond? Were they scared? I just think it's a fascinating case study to maybe spend a little time with.
Absolutely. It's been one of those things that's been such a joy to work on. And so many people who have been at Cactus over the years have contributed to it, which is, one of the things I love about what we do. It's such a team game. Nobody ever gets to claim sole credit for anything. But Man Therapy came about, there was it was about 15 years ago or close to, when that campaign originated. And it was a conversation that started between Cactus and some friends of ours at an organization called the Carson J. Spencer Foundation, which is an anti-suicide foundation, and then the Office of Suicide Prevention at the state of Colorado. And there had been a drastic increase in suicides among, what the audience titled working age men, of guys probably around 30 to 55. And everything that they had tried doing had continued to fail to make an impact, and they kept searching for answers and couldn't find any. And so through those three entities coming together, we kind of just decided, well, let's figure out a new way forward. Let's do something. And really the impetus for it, in terms of how did man therapy become what it is, the research we did, we understood not only were things not working, most of, as you said, there's not a lot of humor in that. It's a hard thing to think, to even have the idea of maybe we could be funny about this. But everything you see, it was, like guys silhouetted with their head in their hands, looking sad and depressed. And, that's not something that's going to make most guys want to pick it up, because most guys don't want to identify with that, because most guys are like, no, I need to be strong, the strong one. I need to have it together. That's what it means to be a man. That's kind of what, especially this group, think 15 years ago, mental health is way more commonly talked about in society these days. But 15 years ago, that was not the case, especially for this generation that's a little bit older and going through these moments where they're struggling and hurting and feeling the stress of providing for families and not having things work out the way they want, et cetera, just as much as anyone else. And they're also a generation of men that it's ingrained in them. You don't talk about that. That's weakness. That's not manly. That's not strength. And so, what we decided to do, well, there was a couple things that kind of led to our strategy. One was realizing through our research that by the time a man was in a place where he was seriously considering thoughts of suicide, it was often too late for especially something like an advertising campaign to reach that man and in a meaningful way that would turn the course for him. And so one of the things we realized is we had to go upstream. We had to start earlier, and we had to start to change the norms and the conversation among men to where it's okay to talk about needing help. And so that was one strategy. And the other was, as you said, the humor thing. And really we came upon that as one, if you and I were sitting down and having a beer or whatever and just chatting, and we're friends and something's just off about you and I'm worried about you, I'm wondering if you're okay, what I'd probably do is crack a joke about the topic. And that's kind of the way we break the ice. But then I'd follow that. If you laugh along with that, I'd be like, but really, like, are you doing all right? Like, you don't usually, because culturally it's not been a part of the conversation to just, it's getting better with younger generations now, but especially with that group, to just ask, hey, how you doing, buddy? Are you really okay? That would feel off-putting and weird and uncomfortable.
Yeah, guys need the humor to take the edge off, kind of.
We need the humor, exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly what it does. It takes the edge off and just kind of opens a little crack in the door to where maybe we can open this a little wider and have an actual conversation about it. And so we're like, well, that's the way we need it. Let's talk to guys the way guys talk to guys. There's no reason we can't have fun with this and laugh about this, because we're not trying to be creative with it. We're trying to use creativity to solve the problem. And the way you do that is by finding a truth, finding something meaningful and real, and then pushing that button with people. So we used comedy to break the ice and let guys know, hey, it's okay to talk about this stuff. And if we're able to talk about it in the way guys you would admire and respect talk about it, then it starts to feel okay. It doesn't feel like it's coming from somebody who's not like you. And so that was kind of the impetus of how it started and ended up being a comedy first approach to male therapy and mental health. But it's lasted for 15 years now. It started as just this small Colorado endeavor with a handful of dollars really to try to pull it off, and it was people buying in and scrapping stuff together because they wanted to be a part of doing something meaningful. And now it's in so many states have licensed man therapy across the country. It's in Australia and other countries. Like it's really caught on because it works, because it's effective. And it's one of my favorite things to talk about. One, because I can't take any more credit for it. In fact, I can take a lot less credit for it than some of the people who were originally a part of it. I've had to get the opportunity to get my hands in it quite a bit over the years, but it was something that I was just kind of peripherally involved with to begin with, and so I feel like I can brag about it real easy. But the impact it's had, like we have still voicemails that Joe, our CEO, has from men who called and said, we're in tears saying, last night your website saved my life. Like just things like that stick with you and remind you that, man, the power we have in advertising to not just sell soda and candy and whatever else, like that's fun. And we can enjoy, being creative and artistic and having a lot of fun connecting with people that way. But we also have this megaphone that it feels like none of us, did anything to earn the ability to have. But suddenly you're able to be out there creating campaigns that help people, literally save their lives. And that's something that's just remarkable to get to be a part of, and kind of makes everything else feel worthwhile, the hard parts of everything we do.
I love that. Yeah, I love the idea of kind of the mission side of, some clients, a lot of agencies will, bookmark a percentage of their time to work on nonprofits or work on kind of cause related campaigns as kind of a give back. But it's always exciting when like that's not, just like a side project to do for the sake of doing something nice, when it's actually a campaign with real budgets and real meaning and real impact that is the goal. So I love that. Let's dive in a little bit to that, that purpose versus profit, component. Cactus does focus on a lot of work that helps people thrive. Have you guys ever had to, walk away from a lucrative piece of business or a project because it didn't align with, the mission, so to speak?
Yeah. Immediately, a couple examples come to mind. I won't say who.
Yeah, obviously you can protect the guilty, but more just kind of aligning with that concept of purpose and mission.
Yeah. I remember there was a client we had that we had him for about, I think it was between 6 and 9 months, and we kept trying to turn the ship with them in terms of what that relationship looked like and felt like, but. Speaking of thrive, like one angle of it is they didn't help us, our employees thrive. The teams that worked on it, they were rude. They were, just unprofessional, and just behaved in ways that was just ultimately unacceptable. We tried to give them the benefit of the doubt and help things along and have corrective conversations and come to some common agreements on how things should go. And it didn't work out, and we walked away from it. Even though it was a highly lucrative account, it was making it, I talked about high bar for the work, high bar for the experience. It was really lowering the bar of the experience. And so we had to walk away from that for the good of the agency. And that was something that we didn't regret and never looked back from. And I think, you sometimes have to make those choices because it affects not just, it ultimately affects who you are. And do you actually live up to some of the things that you really believe that you're about, and when push comes to shove. So there have been instances of that. And there's other clients that, we haven't walked away from that are difficult. It's challenging at times. And, but, there's always a negotiation there of like trying to, how do we make sure that the relationship is healthy and the work is healthy and the people working on it are healthy in the process? There's not a lot of terrible, awful examples, thankfully, that we've been a part of. But, you also can't just toss every client out the window, because that's revenue that keeps people's jobs and all that stuff too. So a lot of it is learning how do you handle difficulties. And then there's been other accounts that we've said no to because, it just doesn't seem to be aligned with what we feel good about. I remember early in my career, people talking about advertising as kind of this ooky, gross, slimy thing. And I don't know if maybe I've been shepherded, away from all that because I've been at Cactus, and that's never been kind of the place that we were, and we weren't any of those things, and we didn't work with on clients that felt like any of those things. But I think, there have been clients that have come along that were like, it's not necessarily, and the thing is that everyone's got a unique morality. Every agency's got a different morality. And that's really just, what do you find okay and not okay? And for us, there've been some things that's like, that's not okay. That's going to be lucrative. That's a huge industry that's rising. That's something we could latch onto right now and create additional opportunities down the line. But if it didn't feel true to who we are, it felt like the wrong decision to make. And those are hard decisions, because, that's the financial viability of your agency, is getting new business in and being able to hold on and grow client bases. And so it's hard to say no to things that look like there could be good creative opportunities, good financial opportunities, but don't really feel like that's who we are. And so those are tough choices to make, but I feel like, I'm grateful to be at a place that has the kind of integrity to make those choices when they feel like they've come along.
Yeah, for sure. At my last agency was the first time I ever, saw a client fired, so to speak. And, it kind of had both elements of what you were talking about. It had, well, maybe even more than that. It was like, it had the, the friction, the relationship being somewhat friction heavy, like right out of the gate. Yeah. A category that was late to the channel, which was creator marketing, because it was in the financial services space. And it was just late to the channel and had a lot of regulation. And then it had, kind of the ick factor of being like high interest loans and predatory lending, or some people would brand it as predatory lending. And yeah, just all the things like in the pitch, it's like, man, this doesn't feel great, but maybe we give it our best college try. And sure enough, it was like within the end of that first campaign, when we decided not to renew, I was like, oh, this makes sense. But I also had a lot of respect for my CEO. That's like, yeah, it's just not like culturally, like we can't take money and burn out our people. And, have our people, want to leave and find other jobs because they don't like working on the business, either for what it stands for, or like maybe if any one of those three things would have, like maybe the channel, like, maybe of that like three-legged stool, if one of them was really good and then the other two is bad, maybe there's a place to like try and work on the other two. But when all three are bad, that's a tough one.
Yeah. Those are tough decisions to make, but yeah, they got to be made one way or another. And there's pros and cons to either way you go.
For sure. All right. So we talked a little bit about your portfolio, massive regional brands and national brands, Colorado Lottery, University of Miami, Fjällräven. How do you guys position yourself as a full service agency, and how do you kind of bubble up above kind of that? I imagine people like to put you in a box of being like a regional agency, especially with the clients that are like, Colorado Lottery, kind of Colorado based. So how are you able to insert yourself into pitches and opportunities to show that you guys have that national mid-size agency chops?
Yeah, that's been an ongoing journey for us. I think when I started here, it was very local. It was, I think, exclusively local. There was a certain point I remember us having a conversation of like, wow, we got a lot of clients with Colorado in their name. Like maybe that's something we need to work on. And we did manage to start getting from local to regional and then national accounts. And it's been a very concerted effort to do that. And it's really challenging, especially when you're small and, it's the same thing as an individual interviewing. Like people look at your resume to assume what you can be projected to do based off of that. And if you haven't gotten opportunities beyond a certain sphere, it's assumed, well, maybe you're less than somebody else who has already had those opportunities. And so we've had to really work at that. And, but we've got clients, we've got Colorado Lottery helped us get North Carolina Lottery and the Hoosier Lottery. And so using
that adage, what's that adage? 2 clients is a conflict, 3 is a specialty.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of get on runs with industries. Sometimes you do really
Yeah.
well for a client in one industry and other ones are drawn to that. And so we've seen that in the lottery industry, in healthcare, in mental health, and in credit unions and banks. We've been able to leverage success for what initially was a local account into other accounts. So I think that's been probably the most successful of the many strategies we've used to try to grow our ability to be seen as a viable option in anywhere a client may be located, is by showing industry expertise and showing our chops to do what we do. But it's funny, that's just another version of the same thing. It's like, oh, you've done well for a credit union, so we're a credit union, so it'll do well for us. But kind of the cool thing about being an agency is what we do is applicable to any kind of account, any kind of brand, any kind of business, because it's really about connecting people with something that they may find meaningful, useful, personal, whatever it is. And so it's the ability to do that is really about understanding brands, understanding business, understanding people. And that really applies across the board. But it is hard to break out of perception barriers. When I started at Cactus, we were 10 or 12 people, incredibly small. We're 85-ish, I think, right now, give or take. And so much, much larger, but still considered pretty small by some brands. And so sometimes your size works against you in different ways, because there's all kinds of perceptions that people have, for whatever reasons. But, we like to believe that if we show up in the room, we can compete with anybody out there. We can hold our own. But it's not always about even the best agency, but it's about the best fit. Are we the right fit for you as a brand? And just like with a job or a marriage, you want somebody who's the right fit that you can have long-term success with. And so we try to really help clients see the value that we can bring, no matter what you might think of us and our history and our size, or what your history is as a brand. What's the potential that can be realized when the two of us come together?
I love that. All right, so we made it 36 minutes in without talking about AI, but I feel like it's the inevitable tip of everybody's tongue these days. So, you've kind of been through a lot of technological revolutions to the birth of social and web and digital. Do you view generative AI as a threat to the soul of copywriters, or is it the most powerful pencil we've ever been given? What is your perspective, especially from the point of view of coming up through the copywriting channel?
Boy, I wish I had I guess I'm glad I don't have a complete answer on that yet, or at least a set in stone answer. I think I'm still discovering every day what I think about it. Like off the top, you talked about kind of the big Terminator fears to, is it going to take my job fears and everything. And I think there's a talked about morality a minute. There's a morality struggle with that, whether it's the environmental impact, whether it's the intellectual impact in terms of intellectual property and stealing, from other people or borrowing from other people. And so I've thought about that. I was like, but at the same time, we as humans borrow from influences that are out there too. So it's not entirely different from a certain respect. And so there's a lot of different ways to kind of pull and push on how you think about all these different aspects of it. And to me, it's still an unknown in a large sense. We're embracing AI and using it. Kind of feels like if we don't try to surf this wave, we're going to be left behind. And so we can't just bury our head in the sand, pretend it's not here, hope it goes away, have some kind of strong stance of we're going to be the anti-AI agency or anything like that, because there's ways that it's beneficial, just like the internet is beneficial, just like any tool is beneficial. And I'm sure there are some downsides, some of which I'm semi-informed about, some of which I probably don't even know about. But the reality is it's in front of us. And so we're trying to play and tinker and leverage it where we can. I don't know if it's going to steal creativity or what an agency does. There's certainly fears of like, are we going to get AI to the place where they can basically have a series of AI bots that's their internal agency that can produce stuff. And oftentimes certain clients might not care about the quality of something as long as they can get something done and it's measurable and it's out there and it's iterative. And so there's mindsets that I think are going to want to go those directions with it, and then there's mindsets that are going to be on the opposite end of the spectrum and everywhere in between. And so our approach is we're going to try to embrace and learn all of these tools and as many of them as possible to see. I don't think it's going to magically make everybody, able to do 3 times the work in the same amount of time. I don't know that some of these kind of big overstated destinations that have been promised of what AI is going to do are going to be realistic or not. But as a writer, I think I've experimented with it. I've tried. It feels weird and it feels wrong and ooky. Honestly, sometimes trying to do it because I'm a writer. I generate what I do is I generate words that communicate in certain ways and express myself or a brand or some version of those things combined to create connections and move people in certain directions and get them to think about things differently. And that's part of the joy that I think any of us have in what we do is what do we bring to it? And if I just plug in a few prompts and it spits something out, and that something can be really good, but what it steals from me as an artist is my contribution and the human part of me that feels value in what I do for a living is that I got to be a part of making a thing that accomplished something. And so there's that, which is tough. At the same time, there's been an instance where I used it to kind of like be a first draft that I then, really rebuilt along the way. But one of the hardest things as a writer is to get that initial lump of clay on the table.
Yeah, kind of lay down the scaffolding, so to speak.
Yeah. Most of the process is reshaping. And so if it can help get certain projects where you get an initial lump of clay down and then you can get to the reshaping work, which is really enjoyable and artistic in its own way, then I'm going to embrace that where I can, where it makes sense. But where there's some distance between AI and being a creative artist, as any of us, in advertising are, and all the different ways we bring artistry to what we do. Part of the growth, that's the thing I have the biggest question about is how do you help people grow if they lean too heavily into AI? Because growth comes through struggle. Growth comes through not being able to figure it out and feeling like you're banging your head against the wall over and over and over. And then something hits and you click with it and then you start to run. And like, that's how you get more experience. People want to pay for experience, but you got to have experience to become experienced. And that comes through the struggle, that comes through kind of grinding through things when it feels like you're running down to one dead end after another. So I think there's a way to leverage it as a tool and take advantage of what it can bring, but I don't think it can replace certain things. And but who knows? Maybe we're all out of jobs in 5 years, and I doubt we're all on vacation constantly. So who knows what future we're headed towards? But in the moment, we're trying to embrace it for everything that it can to help us get better at what we do.
Yeah, I love it. I'll spend a brief moment talking about the environmental impact. It's crazy. I was listening to some statistics last night about the new planned data center that is trying to be built in Utah. And, the capacity is 9 gigawatts. And if you think about that, that's currently half the power that the state of Utah actually uses.
Wow.
The layout from a footprint perspective is 3 times the size of the island of Manhattan. And if you think about the largest manufacturing center in the entire country, or maybe even the entire world, is the Boeing plant in Everett. And the Boeing plant in Everett only uses 1/4 of a gigawatt of power every single year. So the current largest manufacturing capacity in the world uses, what is that? I guess I'm not great at math either, but 1/27th of the planned power for this, this next level data center in Utah. So, I can definitely relate to like the idea of the environmental impact. Just when you think about like the scale of some of these numbers is like almost unimaginable. But, going back to the creativity component, one thing that I think is as exciting as somebody who came up on the biz dev side. And, I went to school to be a screenwriter. So I did at one point fancy myself as someone who, would go down the writing path. But what I found, in my early days trying to make it in Hollywood is, when I actually sat down to put my, fingers on the keyboard, that was the part of being in Hollywood that I hated the most. Is like, I was like, almost like, it was like OCD uncomfortableness of like, oh, writing. I'd rather be out there at the networking event or, doing the producer kind of side of things, which is where I went, and eventually in the industry gravitated towards business development. But, what I do love is, now with AI, you can kind of take the medium in which you are good and like does give you energy for me, which is talking to people, having conversations on video. And then AI can watch these videos from 29 different dimensions, kind of transcribe and not only listen, but watch. It actually watches the video. And then it says, here's what's happening. And then you can use that as kind of baseline of like, are you going to write a blog post? Are you going to write a caption for LinkedIn? Are you going to, have these other derivatives? So, I think that is a cool thing. Like people who write but don't like being on camera can take that written word and turn it into a podcast, maybe not a video podcast, but definitely an audio podcast through platforms like 11 Labs, et cetera. And then you can kind of go the other direction too, to go from a medium like video and push that out to the written word. So I do like how it helps you kind of like beef up your skill sets and maybe areas that you're either not as good at or areas that you just find more tedious and doesn't like give you energy.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where I've, on a personal basis found it most useful is like, I don't want it to replace what I do in certain things, but the things I don't enjoy doing, the things I'm not as strong at, if I can leverage it there to at least get a head start on things or help take care of something that is a kind of a menial task that is more of a time suck for me to do than it is value for me to do. And if AI can help me get a running start towards something there so that I can spend time doing the thing that I can really craft and hone, then yeah, it's like, it's at a certain point, I understand the arguments too. Like photographers kind of took over the world that illustrators had. I've got some old illustrated ads in front of me from like the 1940s. It was like, that's how ads were made. And then photography came along. And then, all the photography software and image generating software of, all the Adobe products kind of took that. And, so everything's kind of takes certain jobs away, I guess is the simplest way to say it, or makes certain jobs less dominant in what their space is. But there's, the train's moving and might as well at least be on the tracks, I guess is the best way I can say to approach it.
Yeah, love it. Well, Brian, great to spend some time with you this morning, get to know your thinking a little bit. Congratulations on all the success you guys have had and the long tenure in your position as Chief Creative Officer. I always think that, somebody who stays in their job for a long time, it's kind of the rarefied air, if you think about it these days. And I think it's important to explore why and what types of cultures produce results that are more similar to, the careers our great grandparents had, where they started off with one company and stayed there for their entire lives. So I think it's a worthwhile exploration. If folks want to learn more about Cactus, follow along with your thinking, where would you like to send people to stay in touch?
Sure, they can find us cactusinc.com. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, a few other places. But yeah, we're out there. We're findable. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you, Dylan. This has been fun.
Thanks, buddy. And for those of you at home, if this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to give us a follow or a subscribe. If you're listening to the show, a honest review on whatever platform you might be listening on is how we find a larger organic audience. And last but not least, if there's a brand out there or a creative who wants to, or maybe someone who wants to get into the agency world and they're thinking, should I go big agency or should I try and find a smaller shop, to get a little bit more experience, roll up your sleeves, or just somebody who you think would take value in listening to the conversation that I had with Brian today, don't forget to share the show And with that, have a great week, bud. Appreciate you.